thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest, agency founder, leading professional service, brands transformations, and of course, the author of the book, Naming Book, no other than Mr. Brad Flowers.
Hey, Daniel.
Welcome, Mr. Brad, on Outback Essay. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I know?
Yeah, my name is Brad Flowers, co-founder of Bullhorn. We're a branding agency, and we lead professional service firms through brand transformations, as it says there on our website. For those of you who are watching this, I'm currently located in Lexington, Kentucky, and we're awaiting a snowstorm.
Well, it's winter, Mr. Brad, and thank you so much for sharing
That's
your
it.
knowledge and wisdom to the world. Thank you. And today let's talk about what is different about branding a service company. The core product of a service company is a tangible expertise and relationships. How does that change the entire focus of the brand from day one compared to a branding physical product?
Great question. Yeah, I think from a branding perspective, with our clients, there's this clear line. Companies who work um, on products are a little bit removed from the company, and they tend to take on a life of their own and require things like consumer testing and packaging, where professional services are just different. A professional service, the owner of a professional service firm is, when they go about selling their work, they're selling their reputation, they're selling the expertise of their coworkers. And so, because of that, in our work, we find that it's especially important to understand the culture of an organization, because you can't understand the organization's expertise unless you understand the culture, because it resides within the mind of the people. It resides within the culture itself. And so, um, our process is set up into three phases: define, design, and deliver. And in the define phase, we really think like sociologists. We're using some of those same skills, those kind of ethnography skills, to use a college word, that people would use to quickly understand cultures. And so we're doing surveys, small group interviews, one-on-one interviews, workshops, those types of things, so that we can get to know them really well at the beginning, so that in the second phase, when we go to do the design work, whether that's graphic design, visual stuff, or whether it's language, that we're creating differentiation for their company based on something that's actually different, which is their culture and which is their expertise. So we want to create differentiation based on expertise. And then in the third phase, the delivery phase, is really about making sure that when your ideal clients are considering your service, that they think about you, because we all know right now our ideal clients are out there thinking about what we do, and they're not even thinking about us. So we want to make sure that our clients are in that consideration set.
Interesting answer. Mr. Brad, a product brand can focus on features and benefits.
Hmm.
For a service, the brand is often synonymous with the founder or key people. How do you build a service brand that is both personal enough to be trusted but scalable enough to survive beyond a single individual?
Yeah, that is actually a really interesting question, and I think it's changed recently. There there was there was a time. I'm thinking about it in a couple of ways. I'm thinking about, one, the core brand assets, and then two, I'm thinking about the marketing assets that kind of emanate from the core brand. And so I think the core brand assets, you want something that is that's that's kind of descriptive of your expertise, that hints at a brand story, that shows differentiation. But ideally, the core brand assets are something apart from the founder. So this is currently a big issue because, as you know, lots of professional service agencies, whether they're law firms, architecture firms, accounting firms, engineering, uh, real estate development, oftentimes they're named after the founder or the founding partners. And so what we're hearing is that as these companies go to scale, that they're having a hard time scaling because younger folks don't want to necessarily be associated with the name of a person they may not even know, someone who may not even be in the picture anymore. And so those core brand assets, a lot of times, it's nice to have some separation between the founder. However, I can say that, and then out of one side of my mouth, I'm saying that, and then out of the other side of my mouth, there's another interesting thing happening where, so what happens with professional service firms is most of us grow by word of mouth. So we do a good job for one company, then the founder or the leader of that company tells someone else, who tells someone else, who tells someone else. The problem with that is there's a revenue ceiling with word of mouth growth or word of mouth marketing. And so eventually, for ambitious firms, you get to a point where you want to grow beyond that. And right now, we're at a place where people are starting to use AI platforms as search engines, even though that's not always the best use of the search engine. We know they're doing it, and so because of that, it puts a lot of pressure on the company to create more and more content. Because if people are doing these searches, say the best professional service branding agencies, if my thinking doesn't show up when people make those searches, I'm not going to be in the consideration set again. And so, on one hand, again, to answer your question, which was a great question and a little complicated, the core brand assets are sort of separate and they're something that everyone in the agency can identify with. But then what we're seeing is that with content creation, it does help if there's a principal or a couple of key individuals who are creating content from their own perspective. What makes them unique? How do they think about something? And that, because I think potential clients want to hear from individuals. Who are the people who are making decisions? Who are the people who are influencing how work gets done? And so that's sort of the two different parts of it. I think it is important in content creation to make sure that there is a customized face to it and that it's one of the leaders of the firm.
So, Mr. Brad, trust is the primary currency for
Yes.
service brands. Beyond testimonials, what are the most powerful ways to build a signal trust when customers can try before they buy?
Well, I think this is going to be self-serving, of course, Daniel, because I run a branding agency, but I think investing in branding projects is really truly a strong trust signal, because what it signals, the reality is branding projects are expensive, and the return on investment, it has a really long return horizon. So I think it's an excellent investment, but it does take a long time to get realized. And so what that signifies to your clients is that you care about your people, you care about your expertise, you care about doing the best work possible, and that you're investing for the long haul, that you're going to be around. Because, the worst case scenario, you have a really strong service provider that you love, and then, you realize that really all they were trying to do was position their firm to be sold to some big conglomerate, and then you have to find somebody else, because it's really, these sort of services are really difficult to replace. And so once you find someone you like, you kind of want to stick with them. So it creates that signal that you can you can trust us because we're making these long-term investments. And there are a lot of other ones. I was talking about content just a minute ago, and I think content's an interesting one. If you can write from your own perspective and show that you're thoughtful and that you're a real person, that's a trust signal. And um, it's a place where people get it wrong because it's really tempting to just type into, again, getting back to AI, to type into some sort of AI platform, help me generate 20 LinkedIn posts. And the problem is people can hear that, and that it really degrades trust. So it's a really fine line, really. What who are you, and what do you stand for as a person, and can you put yourself out there?
Mm. Interesting, interesting. Mr. Brad, so how does the longer, more relational scale cycle of a most high value service influence the brand messaging content strategy from the outset?
So, well, from the very outset, like if you want to think about the very most fundamental thing, we could talk about the brand name, for example.
Yes, please.
And I think um, professional service, as you mentioned, this is going to be long sales cycle. It's going to be an expensive investment oftentimes. It's high trust, as opposed to, if we contrast that with something like a more inexpensive product, which might be an impulse purchase. And so for when you're working on a naming project, there are a couple of linguistic hacks that help to make names more memorable. Uh, well, a couple are rhyming, initial hard consonant, wordplay, and there are a handful of others. So the interesting thing is that using those can be effective, but it can also serve to cheapen it a little bit. And so you think of something like Kit Kat or Reese's Pieces, or Laffy Taffy, even Chick-fil-A, where it has this kind of like unusual spelling that makes it feel maybe like it came from an earlier era. Those are all those are all memory enhancing devices that I think work really well for items that are not, the purchase isn't really that consequential. Whether I buy a Snickers bar or a Reese's Pieces doesn't really matter that much. About the same price, um, probably about as satisfying. But when we think about professional service companies, it's kind of totally different, right? And so I think if it's a fine line to create names that are memorable and meaningful, but I think with professional services firms, what we're trying to do, rather than create these sort of like quick, um, sort of uh, what I would call a meaning hook, or something that sticks in your head but doesn't really have much significance. Like we don't really know what a Kit Kat is, for example. It doesn't really mean anything, and it doesn't really matter. It's just something that sticks in your head, and if you see it, you recognize it, and maybe you decide to buy it or not. In professional services, what we hopefully do is we create something similar where when you see it, it's intriguing enough to cause disruption, but that what happens then is the rest of the brand can fill in, and that it serves more as a jumping off point. And so it serves as a repository of meaning rather than something that's kind of empty. And so I would say that's a really basic way that the long sales cycle can affect, or the nature of long sales cycle in professional services can affect the brand. And I think if you look if you kind of peel back the layers, that's a good example that's true of sort of every step, whether you're creating language around the brand identity. The language needs to feel substantial, consequential. It needs to be on brand, reflect the people who you're going to talk to. It needs to be consistent with the tone of voice, whether you're on YouTube or LinkedIn or on your website, etc. So I think that's a good question, and it's probably true in lots of ways, but that's one example.
Hmm. Yes, definitely. So, Mr. Brad, what are your short term and long term goals? as
My
a
short
founder?
As a founder, my um, short term goal is we have recently gone through sort of a repositioning. As I mentioned, almost all professional service firms hit this revenue ceiling related to word of mouth, and we're also a professional service firm, so we know this particularly well. And um, one thing we've become convinced that if you go back to your brand positioning and think about who you really do the best work for, in which we're really honing in on these professional service firms, that if you think about those people, and if you kind of can focus in, that it makes a lot of things easier, especially around marketing. So if I'm creating a content piece and someone is like, go write a piece about branding, it's like, it's almost impossible. There's so much out there about branding. It's like, what would I say about logo design or language or color theory or image styles? But if it's write a piece about the problems that the leaders of professional service firms face related to their brand, well, then I can write quite a bit about that. I can kind of list off probably 100 different topics, because I'm one of those people, and I'm also having those problems. And so, um, one of the issues is with the generalist position, you just can't really spend enough money to advertise to generate any leads. And so it's hard to create marketing that's effective other than word of mouth, until you really narrow in. So my short term goal um, is to continue to create value for these professional service firms and show that we're a really indispensable partner, um, and and more effectively show that through our marketing, so that our marketing can generate leads in addition to word of mouth. Well, I'm exceptionally thankful for the word of mouth leads, and I think um, they signify that a lot of things have gone right. At some point you need to grow beyond them. Um, so I would say that's a big short term goal, and I think it's probably something that a lot of other people running professional service firms can resonate with.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. Brad, and looking forward for more success. And I'm inviting you to be part of my entrepreneurship 101, and let's talk about entrepreneurial mindset. So, what will be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be a founder like you?
I would say when you're starting off, you're going to hear the main piece of advice you're going to hear is focus, focus, focus. And actually, I literally just said that. I said that you need to, focus in and narrow your positioning. However, you have to remember that focus and narrowing your position is a luxury of money. And if you don't have money, you need to take on whatever you can do to keep the I don't know, whatever metaphor you want to use, to keep the trains on time or keep the, boat afloat or whatever. And so like early on in our agency history, we took on lots of jobs and lots of different types of work that weren't necessarily what we wanted to be doing, but you kind of need to sometimes do things in order to pay the bills. Because don't forget, the most important thing isn't to create the best positioning. The most important thing as a business person is to stay in business so that you can keep going.
Mm.
So that's my big piece of advice is remember that at some points it will be really important to narrow in your focus, and at some points it will be important to open back up again and be more broad and pay attention to what cycle you're in and what phase you're in, and give yourself the grace and the time, because no one gets it right all the time.
Definitely. So, thank you for that advice, Mr. Brad. And the know, like, and trust factor is a paramount, right?
Hmm.
What role does personal branding of key leaders play within the overall corporate service brand, and how do you balance the two?
Yeah, I think it's really important. People want to see who the leaders are, and they want to hear how the leaders think, because they assume that's going to be indicative of thinking of the rest of the firm. I also think we're in a time where there's just a low trust in institutions in general. And so if all of the communication from your firm comes from your company handle, whatever platform it's on, I think it'll sound a little cold and detached. And I don't think it'll have the same impact. And actually, it's something that we've recently been changing. In the past, I thought, well, we want to look professional and things need that I write need to come from Bullhorn because when people work with Bullhorn, they're not just working with me, they're working with all these other really smart people. Um, but it turns out I was totally wrong. They actually do want to hear from me, and that they don't expect the people don't necessarily expect just to work from me, but they want to hear who I am and what do I stand for. Because I think at the end of the day, regardless of what you're purchasing, when you're purchasing something like this, you're buying a relationship, and um, so you don't want to do business with a company. You want to do business with people, and you want to do business with people you like and think that you can have things in common with and have a fruitful relationship. So I think it kind of comes down to that relationship building um, in your personal brand. And I think the risk is your personal brand going off target and being too, talking about too many different things. So that would be my piece of advice. If you're thinking about writing about thought leadership or whatever, I think you can't really do that until you have narrowed your positioning enough. Because if your positioning is still really broad, one day you're going to write about leadership, and then one day you're going to write about color, and then one day you're going to write about whatever. So it's going to feel all over the place. So I do think a strong personal brand comes from a strong brand positioning, which is sort of counterintuitive.
Mr. Brad, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in sixth season, abstract poetry in third season, and of course, my book 101 review in sixth season as well. Comedy 101 in third season, and food 101 in sixth season too. Geography 101, love letters, movie 101 review, music 101 our fourth season. Science 101, Sex 101 in its third season, Trivia 101, Law 101, Health, Mental Health 101, Motivation 101, Entrepreneurship 101, and Bible Verses 101
Amazing.
are my baby podcasts. So please listen
Amazing.
to. Thank you. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Brad, tell us if you could give one piece of a counterintuitive branding advice to a brilliant but under the radar service company founder, what would it be?
It would be pay attention to, if you have design problems, it's sort of obvious that you have a brand problem. But what isn't as obvious is if I'm hitting a revenue ceiling, is that a sales problem or could that be a brand problem? If you are having a hard time recruiting, is that about your HR policies or maybe do you have a brand problem? So I would look under the surface and scratch under the surface of some of these issues that you're having. And oftentimes, these bigger things that you assume are related, like in recruiting, maybe we're not paying enough or we don't have a compelling enough package. Um, Maybe it's really that people don't want to be associated with your brand because people see that as an extension of themselves, an extension of their brand. And so that's my advice is that don't think of branding as just a design issue, but it's something that kind of underlays your whole business. And if your design is out of step with your culture, nothing else is going to work right.
Definitely. And Mr. Brad, in an era of AI and automation, how can premium service brands double down the human, creative, and strategic elements that technology cannot replicate?
Well, I think a lot of times this isn't an original thought to me, but you hear people saying that AI or technology doesn't create, but it creates velocity around something. And
Mm.
so if you don't have a good idea, if you don't have a good system, maybe all AI is doing is spreading that or making that happen faster. So I think it's a time where strategy kind of rules, and strategy still best comes from people, and the insights come from people, not machines, and the things that resonate. So I would say, yeah, double down, and I'll be right there with you.
Yes, definitely. So, Mr. Brad, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your business, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Yeah, you can find us pretty much everywhere on the internet at Bullhorn Creative. That's our URL, our LinkedIn handle, and Instagram and YouTube. Or you could also, if you're interested in the naming book, if you're an entrepreneur who really just wants to create a name and then forget about naming, go to thenamingbook.com, and you can buy that just about anywhere that you buy books.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Brad Flowers, because if you support him for sure, more and more empowering business like this to
Do it.
rise. So, Mr. Brad, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel.
Mordecai people, see you soon.